Hello, everybody. I am Sarah Mulakutla. I am a neurologist and founder of Mindful Neurology. We are here today for video one of the meditation course. This is a brief series of videos that explain what happens to the brain during meditation. The intent of the video is to help you understand the concepts. So when you listen to audio recordings or practice on your own, you understand what's happening, what we're trying to do, and get the most out of it. I am joined today with Dr. Alan Chien. Dr. Chien is a recently graduated physician who expressed interest in learning about mind-body medicine, and I asked him to join me on these video recordings. I'm using this opportunity to tell Dr. Chien a little bit about the science behind it. You'll see if he has any questions, he's welcome to ask. This is really a live conversation and teaching. And without further ado, thank you, Alan, for joining us today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and dive into video one. So I'm holding here a picture, a model of the human brain. And I'm explaining it now because we're going to be looking at some pictures of the brain to help explain what happens with meditation. So our human brain is about a 3-pound organ in our brain. It's got two hemispheres, which are mostly symmetrical. And if you cut it down the middle, you see a really beautiful cross section, which I'm going to be walking you through. Down here is the spinal cord. This is where all the nerves that control the body come into the brain, and you have a really rich area of neurons here where that helps to signal and direct all this information. This is called the deep gray matter down here, the brain stem. A lot of the respiration, swallowing takes place here. And then there's projections to the cerebral cortex and the cerebrum, which is this outer area. To give you an example, there are nerve cells that populate this outer area in here, but there's 100 billion nerve cells or neurons in the human brain. It's about as many cells as there are stars in the Milky Way. And somehow they have to work together. They have to coordinate and be able to send messages in order to execute what is the brain or the body trying to do. So these cells do this by working in networks. And I wanted to explain to you because I'm going to show you a picture of your thinking networks in the brain to explain a little bit what this looks like on an ongoing basis. So let me put up a slide. And this is the main slide that I use to teach meditation. Let me go ahead and put it into presentation mode. Remember, I was showing you a picture of the brain cut down the middle. That's these images on the left. In the center images, you're looking at the brain sliced from front to back. We call that axial. This is a different way of view to look at the brain. So it's almost like I took the half part off and it looks a little bit like this. This is a half of it. You have one hemisphere on the left and the other one, and you have these holes. These are black areas are holes in the brain where the fluid circulates. And all the way on the right is also a cross-sectional top to bottom, but a little bit more to the side, just above, actually through the eye. See here in the image on the right, you can see the eye, and all the way on the left, you can see the nose. So we're going from here to laterally. And in bright orange on top is all the areas of the brain that become metabolically active when we're thinking. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off for 1 second and ask Alan a question. So I asked Alan just before we started if he had ever heard of the word default mode network. If you remember before, I mentioned that network is the word that describes, oh, I didn't mention it actually. So these, it's all the cells, they connect to different parts of the brain. So you need this part of the brain to connect to your memory, to your emotional center, to your frontal area, which is deciding. And they form these connections that we call neural networks. So every time we're walking, the same group of neurons from the front to the motor area to your memory center that guides you where to turn become active together. This is how different parts of the brain communicate and work together. And the image we saw on the screen shows the bright red areas is a network. I already told you that's our thinking network. But this is how it was discovered. When functional MRI was first discovered in the early 2000s, another term that I'll just take a minute to explain. Functional MRI is when you're looking at what areas of the brain are metabolically active. So if you just look at an MRI, a regular MRI, it'll show you all the structures. This is how we can see a stroke or a mass or something that's physically present. But you need another technology to get the neurons when they're in motion. And how they do that, they look at blood metabolism. So if you're thinking and those networks are going, then the functional MRI can pick it up and tell us these areas of the brains are active. So how was this thinking network first discovered? This is how it was discovered. When functional MRI was first developed, they put people in the scanner, this is early 2000s, and asked them to just be at rest and do nothing at all. And they found a certain group of regions, much like we just saw, to become active and then calm down, and active and calm down. And the researchers, this was seen repeatedly across all different centers everywhere. And they said, well, the brain at rest must have this default activity because they're not doing anything, they're resting, and this very same areas get lit up. So they called it the default mode network. The areas of the brain that become active when the brain is not otherwise engaged. Okay, so that's default mode network. If you ever hear it, Alan, and any of your teaching, this is what it's looking at. It's the most active network in the brain. It took a while for people to figure out this was mind wandering. When you put people into a scanner and tell them to do nothing and just rest, what are they going to do? They're going to start thinking. How do we know this? Because once we start meditating, you realize that our thinking minds are always running. Our default mode network is basically our default modus operation of the brain. We're planning the future. We're remembering the past. We're replaying a conversation, an emotionally poignant interaction we had. We're doing our to-do list. What grocery items are we going to get when we go to the grocery store as soon as we're done with this MRI scan? This makes sense. And you'll learn a little bit more about this when you start meditating. But basically, this study that I'm going to show you was looking at people who were told to rest, and they would ping them and say, what are you thinking about right now? And they were either mind wandering or aware of what they were doing and aware of their thought processes. And this is what this image shows us. The top slide is mind wandering without meta-awareness. So sometimes, as we all quickly learn, you start meditating and you completely get lost in your inner dialogue and you just are thinking and replaying and planning and time goes by. This is what this will look like in your brain. Starting with A, you have sort of these midline areas. That is the frontal area where you're planning the future. Going down to the middle area, this shows our emotional networks. These are generally the midline structures. And number C in the middle is the posterior cingulate cortex. This area is generally associated with emotion. D in the back, it could be maybe your motor strip, or it could be some of your body processing symptoms. Going down to G and H on the right, you have your memory involved. And G is the insular cortex, which is also involved in body processing. So basically, for most of us, when we're mind wandering, we're sort of recreating the story of ourselves, like replaying something. Most people have thoughts that have to do with ourselves. We call that self-referential thoughts, and that's essentially the default mode network, which is what we're seeing here. And the red areas indicate the neurons and the connections to different parts of the brain. Now, something very interesting happened in the bottom. This is called mind wandering with meta-awareness. If we can be aware of our thoughts, those same deep thinking networks are not nearly as strong. And this is what the Eastern disciplines have taught us for thousands of years. Eastern and spiritual traditions, not even Eastern. I was reading recently about how Jewish and Christian traditions, that meditation was a strong part in all these traditions as well, and might have fallen out a bit. But they teach you to sit and try to observe your thoughts. That's what's called meta-awareness. And this is one of the first skills I'm going to ask you to learn in this meditation course. I think I'm going to conclude this first video with just this content here, because I think we're ready to go into a brief exercise here with Dr. Chan and later with your audio recording, where step one, I want you to practice meditation and see if you can catch your mind wandering. If you can catch that, become aware that you're thinking and go back to your focus. I'll explain meditation in just a bit. This is a great place to start. I'll give a sneak preview of what's coming in future videos. The next video, I'm going to show how our thinking and motor networks are linked. They both involve this frontal area that we see very bright on the top left, A and B. Our frontal areas is where motor planning takes place, where we see a lot of connection between the movements in our body. This can explain why in Parkinson's, a stressful or a certain thought can trigger movement abnormalities. And in our program, we do the other way. Let's control your thinking to maximize your movement. We're going to show some MRI studies where you can change what these networks look like. And they use that as therapy for Parkinson's. I'm going to show you some other studies related to that. And most of all, in this course, we're going to learn a whole bunch of strategies for how you can learn to modulate your thinking networks. Any questions, Dr. Xian? Okay, was clear? Good. I have another slide, which I'll probably show in the next video, or I'll have it as a diagram, but there's 3 steps to meditation. First, you choose what you want to focus on. Second, you start the practice of focusing on that, whatever that is. And third, when your mind wanders, you bring it back. So you make a commitment to stay focused. I'll explain this just a little bit briefly. So first, I said when the mind is at rest, that default mode comes up, right? Spontaneous thinking. So the brain does need something to focus on. In our course, I'm going to start with having you pay attention to the inhale and the exhale of the breath. Okay? And as this course develops, I'm going to be offering various alternatives in case you want to focus on something else. But essentially, as you go into meditation, you make the commitment for the next X minutes, this is my object of focus. 2, you begin the practice. And 3, when the mind wanders, you're trying to catch, and both you're trying to catch your mind wandering, because if you don't catch it, it's often its own arena. But 2, if you continue it, you do find peace because it's settled. So you're trying to do both things, to settle the mind and also when it's unsettled to catch it. Last thought before I begin. In our meditation practices, I begin with a body scan. I'm going to ask you to first pay attention to your feet, your legs, your buttocks, feel your body supported. This is the beginning of the process of learning that we can control our attention. We can choose what we want to focus on. And in meditation, you can, if you like focusing on your body, that can be one option. Just focus on body sensations as they arise. And in fact, it's very important for Parkinson's disease because sensory processing in Parkinson's disease, we know it's impaired. So the reason all the meditations or most of the meditations I offer start with a body scan is to help you Start the process of reconnecting with your body, realizing we can feel the sensations of our body and do it intentionally. It's a calming process, and it's a precursor to this meditation where we focus on the breath. When you do this repetitive activity, you calm the nervous system down. It triggers the parasympathetic limb of the nervous system. This is what Dr. Herbert Benson promoted in his relaxation response in the 1970s and 1980s. So there's so many benefits that happen from the small practice of calming the mind, training your attention, building your relaxation part of the nervous system, which facilitates repair and rehabilitation. We're going to get to all of those in future videos. This is the introduction. Okay, I'm going to end this video just by explaining what you can expect in the audio recordings. Okay, so Dr. Chan, you can go ahead and get in any position where your back is relatively straight, so be upright. Put your 2 feet on the ground if possible, and find a comfortable place where you can rest your arms. For anyone in the meditation course, there's a document called Meditation Checklist or Foundations where I talk about posture and getting the right props. Because for many of us, including people with Parkinson's, you might want to support your arms. But for now, you can place them on your lap if that's comfortable. And go ahead and close your eyes, and we're going to bring our attention inward. This is the beginning of meditation when you choose to control your attention. So go ahead and bring your attention to your feet. We'll start with the right foot and then the left. And I'm going to ask you, what can you feel in your foot right now? Can you feel your foot making contact with the earth below it? If there's any cloth or shoe, can you begin to sense? Can you have perception of what that feels like? This is building sensory awareness of the body, something you probably were not thinking about before. Can you feel any difference between the air on any empty skin, if there is present, and a pants or a sock or anything? Can you feel sweatiness? Hot, cold? Let's move on to the next foot. How does that foot compare to the right? Can you feel the contact, the cloth? Okay. In the audio recording, I'm going to walk you through a full body scan where I hence move you up to the knee, to the buttocks, to all parts of the body, teaching you that you can control what's in your awareness. For now, I'm going to lead Dr. Chan on the breath awareness meditation. I'm going to ask Alan to go ahead and bring your awareness to your breath as it is naturally occurring in your body. In and out. In and out. This movement occurs whether we're aware of it or not, but it provides many rich sensations when we choose to focus on it. So for starters, can you observe the transition between the inhale and the exhale? And what that feels like as the breath slows down and then picks up velocity in the other direction. Where in your torso do you feel the movement of the muscles and rib cage expanding and contracting? The air moving into your nostril. Can you trace that airflow in? And as you exhale, can you sense any temperature difference between the inhaled and exhaled air? Where on the outermost tip can you feel the air coming in? You can do the same on your mouth if you happen to be a mouth breather. And how far down into the back of your throat can you feel that air? So I'm guiding you on how you can build sensory awareness of body sensations. And this is so critical in Parkinson's disease because we know that processing is impaired. It's why people with Parkinson's might not be aware when their posture is off or if they're moving slowly. And Alan is doing a great job of staying focused. Stay focused on your breath. Okay. And then I'll give some moments of silence in the audio recording, and I'm going to challenge you to keep your attention on the inhale and the exhale. And whatever you want to focus on, the movement of the ribs, the air movement in your nose, the whole breath, you can keep all of that in your awareness. But make a commitment to stay focused on that. And soon you'll see the mind will wander. There'll be a thought about the future or the past, or a judgment. They'll say, oh, my breathing is so shallow. I never noticed that. This is the cognitive mind coming in to judge, to make an analysis. Become aware of it, back to the breath. And that is meditation, 3 steps. Choose something, start your practice and be committed to it. When your mind wanders, bring it back. This is the end of video 1. Thank you very much for joining us. And there's an audio recording to accompany this.